where the focus will be on what the U.S. Army is doing to deliver future force space capabilities and solutions to the warfighter. Please welcome Mr. Willie Nelson, Director for the Assured Positioning, Navigation, and Timing Cross-Functional Team. Brigadier General Robert Collins, Program Executive Officer, Intelligence Electronic Warfare and Sensors. Mr. Joseph Welch, Deputy Program Executive Officer, Command Control Communications, Tactical. Mr. Patrick O'Neill, Director for the Combat Capabilities Development Command's C5 ISR Center. Mr. Thomas Weber, Director for the Technical Center, U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command. And Dr. Derek Tournear, Acting Director for the Space Development Agency. At this time, let's welcome Mr. Willie Nelson.
Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Nothing like being the first group up on the stage versus on the last day. Not better than being the last group on the last day. But anyway, good morning, everybody. We've got a great panel. My job is to do as little talking as possible so that you can hear from the experts and what we're doing across our PEOs and our labs today. But what I wanted to do is really just start the slides up here. In the first slide, please. So why APNT CFT? What do we do? Just a little quick background on our CFT. We have 3 lines of effort. As you might imagine, the first line of effort is assured positioning, navigation, and timing. And when we stood here last year, that was the topic that we discussed with a panel that talked a lot about what the Army is doing to provide a PACE plan for PNT. Today, this year, we thought we'd talk and focus on our second line of effort, which is tactical space. And again, we're going to learn a little bit more about what that means today. And our third line of effort is navigation warfare, or NAVWAR, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So on assured positioning, navigation, and timing, what is that? Well, GPS works great. It is the gold standard, but what happens when you don't have that? Or it's blocked, or it's jammed, degraded, spoofed, pick your scenario. So what the Army is doing is developing technologies to be able to provide a graceful degradation plan to be able to keep weapon systems and soldiers fighting in those degraded and denied environments. Proud to say we're fielding equipment into Europe to 2CR today. So we went from a requirements generation, prototyping, to fielding in about 18 months. So that's what your AFC is doing for you. And so that took a great teamwork between TICM TR at the cyber world, the PM at a PEO IEW&S, and a big DevOps approach, including AMC and many others that helped make that happen. So again, a true DevOps approach and a team approach made that happen. Today, the focus again is on tactical space, and what does that mean? It's leveraging both commercial, DoD, and military capabilities to be able to leverage those, to be able to provide eyes and ears on the battlefield for our soldiers and our platforms. Be able to reach deep, be able to see and sense deep, and be able to provide that data back in a usable format that our weapon systems can use and our soldiers can use for situational awareness on the battlefield. Navigation warfare, quite frankly, is how do you protect the information you have, the PNT situation, how do you provide some assurances for that, and how do you fight back? How do you punch above your weight class and provide those denial capabilities back? So again, today, met with a great panel. We're going to focus on tactical space, and I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker, General Rob Collins from PEO IEW&S.
Thanks, Willie. Any Nats fans out here? Yeah, seemed to be a pretty good morning. A little bit of buzz going on in the city. As Willie said, Rob Collins out of Aberdeen Proving Ground. I'm the PEO for Intel Electronic Warfare and Sensor. And as one of the most exciting opportunities that we've got as part of the multi-domain operations is both cyber, and then one of the things we're going to talk about today is space. You've certainly seen and heard about a lot of the ability to target deep. I will tell you, in order to target deep, we have to be able to see deep. And we certainly believe that the ability to do that was going to take a multi-layered approach, both on the terrestrial, on the high altitude air, but certainly the opportunity for space provides a significant opportunity for us to do the persistent stare and be able to get that information. What I will tell you today, we do have ground stations that are across our force. We have roughly 101 tactical ground stations, about 13 operational ground stations, and a smattering, sprinkling of other dissemination vehicles that do everything from SIGINT to GEOINT. But I'll tell you, some of those are more specific to the echelon. They're not necessarily tailorable, not as necessarily easy to use, and not as expeditionary as we want them to do. As we look forward into the future, some of the imperatives that we want from our ground station, I would tell you one of the things that we wanted to be able to do is Willie already talked to you, to be able to leverage all capabilities that we have. And I think we have a phenomenal team here of SDA, the SMDC, from the S&T community and others, but we want to be able to leverage all assets, whether it be commercial or whether it be national technical means for both GEO and SIGINT. We also want to be able to leverage high altitude. The Joint Strike Fighter is going to put out a phenomenal amount of intelligence so that we can be able to pull that in all for our warfighters. We're really looking to type of a Lego type approach, what I would kind of say a modular type of a kit, where I've kind of got a base infrastructure for my ground station, my Titan system, that I can plug and play the extra kit based on the area of responsibility that we're able to go to, so that I can tailor that by the particular mission. We also want to make sure that we can push an open systems architecture, whether it be one of the things that we're looking at the C5 ISR community is something called CMOS, that you haven't heard about that, so that essentially some of these RF components become a card that fit nicely in a chassis. But we want to be able to make sure that we can look at open systems architecture. As we start pulling in all this data, there's going to be a significant and overwhelming amount for our intelligence soldiers to be able to process. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, to be able to sift through this large amounts of data so that we can inform and improve the decision-making process, so that time in itself almost becomes a weapon. And then the other thing I tell you, the other two imperatives that I think are game changers for our ground station is not just necessarily to be able to receive the capabilities that are up in space, but the ability for an operational commander to be able to task those assets and orient them into the areas that they want to be able to observe. And then most importantly, as Willie already said, we don't just collect this data for the sake of collecting it. We collect it so that we can distribute that to kinetic, to non-kinetic weapon systems, and for commanders to be able to make decisions on the battlefield. So our linkages beyond just those sense capability into our mission command components, I think the task ability and the distribution of mission command become the most important. The last thing I'll leave you with is just a little bit on schedule. We are moving quickly. We are also engaged in a DevSecOps type approach, an agile type approach. We're already proceeding in Defender 20 to begin some initial prototyping to inform TTPs. 21, 22 will continue our iteration and prototype design through our TNCAP office as we get ready to move quickly into production. We're going to be hosting an industry day up at Aberdeen Proving Ground on the 4th of December for our Titan ground station. And so I would encourage, as I've moved around, I would encourage each and every one of you, if you're not tracking already, get on FedBizOps, make sure you're aware. But we would love to have each and every one of you here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Welch. One of the things that I like to do, make sure in the Intel community we're dreaming up any large bandwidth requirements so we can hand it over to Joe, because we know the communications network can handle it. So Joe, here you go.
Thanks, Rob. That's a great setup. Again, I'm the Deputy PEO for C3T, and essentially what we do is we procure and integrate the tactical components of the Army's network, one of the big 6 priorities under our modernization enterprise. We're talking about a lot of aspects of space today. We're really focused on the mission command networking capabilities, and as General Collins mentioned, we have a pretty tough problem statement to overcome right now. Essentially, we're highly reliant on geosynchronous satellites that are providing us relatively low bandwidth compared to everything else that exists in the commercial world, and at very high latency. And so that introduces a number of challenges for us. First and foremost, it affects our resilience. These are sort of single points of failure in a system that we don't have really any backups for in a lot of cases. It also drives size, cost, and power. So when we're talking to geosynchronous orbit satellites, our dishes are either usually bigger, meaning they'll usually cost more. They're certainly harder to transport, move around, and use in expeditionary fashion. But also, if we get them smaller, then we're paying a price somewhere. We're either using up more capacity on our military WGS capability, or we're paying for it through commercial providers. We have to pay for that power, and those smaller dishes really can cost us a lot, and it scales quite a bit across the Army. The last challenge we have with the sort of the problem statement we're in right now is, and you've heard a lot about the advantages that the Army is looking to take with regard to cloud technologies, artificial intelligence, the fusing of all this data It's really not possible when you're trying to suck that all through a soda straw, as General Collins kind of alluded to. And so for these reasons, we absolutely see the need to expand beyond the communications capabilities that we have today. And we're very excited about the emergence of opportunities in the LEO and MEO space, as well as HTS technologies in GEO. We're working with a number of commercial providers now, trying to understand their roadmaps, putting together limited experimentation activities as we look toward the right solutions. From our perspective, we don't really care who it comes from. If it's commercial, military, from a comms and networking perspective, we want to be able to take advantage of all of it. The infantry brigade combat teams, striker brigade combat teams right now, they have some limited on the move. I won't say high bandwidth, but better than nothing capability. But our armor brigades really, because of the halt we had on prior modernization programs, that's still a gap for us. And so that's a large target area for us. I think there's a lot of opportunity. We've met with a number of vendors here, a lot of potential. Still are some challenges, I think, associated with integrating this technology. One of those is, with more options comes more complexity. So we need technologies to enable us to be able to automate the provisioning of commercial, military, whatever we're going to use, of all these different satellite solutions to get throughput out there, as well as real-time decision making. So we're single-threaded right now in a lot of cases. One potential benefit of that is there's no decisions that need to be made about where the data path is going to traverse. When we have multiple, let's say we have 3 different access points on a vehicle, there's routing and decision making, smart, intelligent, automated fashion that has to take place. Otherwise, we're just going to overload everything we have, or we won't have efficient use of our resources. Last challenge we have is platform integration. It goes to the same thing. The more things that we put on a platform, the more complexity we're adding. So we're interested in science and technology investments and vendor concepts for simplifying the number of satellite transceivers that we can put on a vehicle with a command post, so that we don't make this stuff too heavy and too complex. Last thing I'll mention is we're going to be discussing a lot of these needs that we have at the next technical exchange meeting that we work with the network cross-functional team that's taking place in Austin, Texas, 19 to 21 November. So if you haven't already looked at that, the registration information's out there, and I encourage anyone who has concepts in the space to come meet with us. Here are challenges for capability set 23 in a little more detail, and be prepared to let us know how you think you might be able to solve that. I appreciate your time, look forward to your questions, and with that I will turn it over to Mr. Pat O'Neill from the C5ISR Center. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Morning, everybody. So Willie set the stage here. We're talking about tactical space, his line of effort there. And it's all about providing the warfighter what he needs, assured PNT, so the warfighter and the commanders are not worried about where they are and where the bad guys are. So Rob and Joe did a good job talking about things, key driving factors we are pursuing, and Tom and Derek are going to follow with similar kind of things. But one thing that struck me as I was listening is it's really a team effort. It's one of the intents of building AFC, to have this team working together, along with SMDC and the space people all working as a great team together. I think this is a good example of how Willie and his team are really enabling that in a very good way for AFC. Before I talk about what's on the chart here, I'm all about return on investment, maximizing return on investment. That means not repeating what others are doing. So we take this approach in CCDC. In my C5ISR Center, we're either leading, we're following, or we're monitoring. We're leading if it's something that's inherently governmental, highly Army needed. We are following if we're trying to adapt a commercial investment for use in the military, or we're monitoring if it's really a commercial lead, like the LEO constellation you heard about being put up shortly. So the first point there is space. We're in the monitor mode there. What we in the Army do right now is rely on SATCOM through GEO satellites for beyond line of sight comms, and Joe talked about some challenges there like speed and availability. The whole throughput thing is a big challenge area. So our S&T goal is to pursue resilience through diversity, and Rob and Joe both mentioned that as well. How can we rely on commercial LEO satellites to add resilience to what the warfighter needs? So while we don't develop things in this area, we're actively monitoring it. We're pursuing a couple of CRADAs and a couple of contracts to help enable what we're going to contribute to as far as experimentation in the LEO-MEO area. The second point there, the gateway, that's more the experimentation mode. We're trying to understand what the need is for gateways and how we're going to be able to take commercial systems and fit them into the Army's architecture. And the third big point down at the bottom, which is my primary S&T focus, the ground piece down there in the bottom right. By the way, the picture shows LEO, MEO, and GEO growing out from the Earth at the center there, in case anybody wondered what that picture was. Our main S&T efforts are for satellite ground terminals and the related technology to enable those ground terminals. We're trying to leverage commercial investment everywhere we can in component technologies like component arrays and phased arrays. Commercial industry is doing a great job in those areas. We're trying to integrate those into our ground terminals. Also, SATCOM on the move in rugged terrain. Think about that. Army vehicles going over rugged terrain, trying to maintain SATCOM connectivity while hitting bumps and fast turns and water and all the things, even an urban environment and the line of sight challenges. So that's what we're technically focused on right now. The next couple years, we're going to experiment to understand what's emerging as far as the antenna technologies. Look at the ground terminal performance requirements that are needed to hook into the LEO and MEO constellation that's being put up there. And then in FY21, we're going to decide where to put S&T dollars in 22 through 24 to look at how we integrate LEO, GEO, MEO in terminals that the Army can use there. So again, I think it's a great team that Willie kicked off this session with. One good example here, frankly, Tom Weber's next. One of the things that SMDC is doing in Polaris, the S&T they're doing for Polaris, they're using the CCDC developed ground infrastructure to go along with that, which I think that's a good example of things being worked even beyond the AFC PEO construct. And finally, one more thing. Think about being the warfighter out there. You want real-time SA of how PNT is doing. So we're putting a lot of focus into that over the next couple years. We want the warfighter to know when he has confidence and when he has issues he needs to be concerned about. Okay, thanks for your attention. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Weber from SMDC.
Great, thanks, Pat. So next chart. So Pat talked a little bit about the S&T working on the ground station side. I'm going to talk a little bit about the S&T from the space side of it and what we're doing to utilize technology to develop capability for our warfighter. This probably is familiar to many of you. This is directly out of the TRADOC PAM 525-3-1. It is the Army and Multi-Domain Operations 2028. And so the Army is going to have to do things differently than we've been doing, and we're going to have to evolve, and we're going to have to figure out how we apply technology to give us the capability. The Army has to see, we have to shoot, we have to move, and we have to communicate. So how do we do that in a congested, contested environment, and how do we do that with overmatch? So one of the things that we're looking at doing is applying technology that has been evolving. If we all have a cell phone, many of you are using those right now to take pictures. There's more computational power in these now than took man to the moon. And so it's pretty amazing when you think about where technology is going. So how do we leverage that technology, both develop new technology and leverage what commercial industry is doing to provide a capability that we can enhance the warfighter's effectiveness? And so it applies to all of those things on how we can see better, how we can shoot better, move better, and communicate better. And so we're looking at proliferated low Earth orbit space as an opportunity to provide capability. We can provide capability for relatively inexpensive costs that provides us significant numbers and quantity. And so when we have capability in quantity, now we're robust and resilient, and you've heard that from a couple of the folks so far. So it gives us the flexibility now to have that robust and resilient capability. But what that technology also does for us, it gives us an unprecedented level of timeline in which we can get information to the warfighter. It's all about what you know and how fast you know it. And so if we can use large numbers of satellites in low Earth orbit to increase that timeline or decrease it as much as possible to get them stuff as fast as we can, then they have the advantage when it becomes the conflict stage. And so, for example, you can see in the upper right-hand corner there, this is an operational demonstration of an electro-optical imaging satellite that we flew called Kestrel-I. With a very short amount of training, we had soldiers do the operational demo. They were able to task a satellite to take an image over a specific area. The satellite was able to come by in a single pass, collect that image, send that information directly down to the warfighter in minutes in a single pass. So imagine now if you're in the battlefield, you're brigade combat team below, you need information at the speed of minutes or less. Well, this is the kind of capability that enables that. Doesn't need to be exquisite. It needs to be situational awareness that can be used for targeting, or that can be used for, this is how I need to maneuver to outflank or to get around what the enemy forces are doing, or to get images without them knowing what you're looking at, because you're not flying assets over them that they can readily detect and see. Now you have that situational awareness that gives you the opportunity as a battlefield commander to prosecute your mission. And so that's what we're doing in the areas of communication, in the areas of being able to see, and how we help enable assured position, navigation, and timing to allow us to maneuver and move. And then that exquisite sensor to shooter, reducing that timeline gives us that ability to also shoot and be lethal. And so that's where we're working the science and technology and the path that we're pursuing to deliver that capability in the near future and in the out years for our Army. And so with that, I will be followed by Dr. Derek Tournear from Space Development Agency. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you. I really enjoy talking to the Army about space. And the reason I do is Army is the largest user of space. A lot of people get confused on that. A lot of people forget about that. But Army is the main user of military space. That's a big deal. Now, have you noticed a theme from all the speakers today? I picked up on a few themes. Speed, resiliency, and capabilities. That's what we're focused on. That's actually why the Space Development Agency was created. It wasn't created to make sure that we can get a lot of new technology up, do a lot of new developments to do these things. It was so that we could concentrate on the warfighter, concentrate on capabilities, and get those to where they're needed. So I'm going to go over a couple priorities. So the Space Development Agency has a lot of different things it's trying to do, but it can be boiled down into two main priorities. The first one is to be able to do detection and tracking of the next generation advanced missile threats. We want to be able to detect those, track them, and be able to get a targeting solution so that we can defend against them. Now, the main one that I want to talk about is this time-sensitive ground threats, which we call targeting, beyond line-of-sight targeting. That's where the Army is most affected, and that's where we're working very closely with the Army to make sure that we're tied together. So this is the ability to detect and track and maintain custody of anything, say, larger than a truck, and be able to actually give a targeting fire control solution to a weapon in the field in real time, anywhere on the globe, at any time. That's the goal, that's the capability. So that is what we're focused on when we do developments. And if you heard, it all kind of boils down to that. How do we get speed? How do we get this capability? And how do we do it in a resilient manner? Those are the driving requirements, if you will, for the Space Development Agency's mission and what it's trying to do. The way we do this, since we're not really a top-down requirements focus, we're capabilities bottom looking up, what we did is we look at those two main drivers and we said, okay, what's necessary? In order to do that, we came up with a layered architecture. All proliferated LEO, but several different layers. And the main layers that we're concerned with are the backbone layer to have this interconnectivity to allow all of this real-time communication to take place. We call that our transport layer. And that layer is interconnected satellite links, connected optical crosslinks. That doesn't matter. That's just all the technology. The real idea is that allows us to go from point A to point B in near real time. All right, and then we have the custody layer. Custody is one of our three sensing layers, and that's the one that's most impactful for the warfighter today at AUSA, and that is the ability to maintain tracks and custody on these objects, get those data to our transport layer, and then our transport layer be able to get that down to an actual, as Mr. Nelson always puts out, to someone that can pull a lanyard and have a firing control solution. And so we're working with the Army to make sure that we close that link. As far as the sensing layer, which we call our custody layer, to make that out, we're working with partners to build out those sensing satellites and be able to plug in seamlessly into our transport layer to do that real-time comm. And then we have the other sensing layer is our tracking layer. That's the ability to do the hypersonic glide vehicle advanced missile threat detection and tracking. Again, then get that data to our transport layer and to a fire control solution. And then the third sensing layer is our deterrence, which is a space situational awareness looking at things that are cislunar for specific threats. But the key things to walk away with, Space Development Agency is focused on speed, real-time firing control solutions. 2, we're focused on resiliency, and that's why we're going to this proliferated architecture. Can these satellites be taken out? Probably. Can you take them all out? Probably not before you have a really bad day. So that's what we're focused on. And then third, capabilities. I'm not going to talk about all the different technology that these satellites provide. That's not important. What's important are those capabilities. Beyond line of sight, fire control solutions directly to a weapon system. That's what we're focused on, and that's what we're working with the Army to try to make sure that that's a reality. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, folks, that's about it. So I'm going to try to wrap it up. So about 18 months ago, Honorable McCarthy and General McConville asked us to take a look at all of the space activities happening within the Army, develop a fully synchronized, integrated roadmap and strategy forward on how the Army can exploit space for the tactical warfighter. So we did that, presented that to the boss, had a series of funded and unfunded activities which are now all fully funded, and I'll just summarize. That brings it down to 4 main areas. We've talked about those, but I just want to summarize. So this Army space strategy is focused on communications, PNT, ISR, and battle management, command and control, or BMC2. Without that, you just got a lot of really cool space stuff up there, but how do you bring all that together in an integrated, synchronized battle management system that the warfighter can use and be able to accomplish the feats and have the effects that we just talked about today? Okay, so hopefully that was beneficial. We're going to turn it over for a series of questions for those. I think we have about 10 minutes, 8 minutes or so. So let me go ahead and turn it over to the moderators. Do we have any questions? Come on up, panel. All right. That means we dazzled you with answered all your questions. So again, if there's any questions, we'll be up here for a few more minutes before we take off for a media event. But again, thank you very much for your time this morning and your support to what we're doing, and again, support you and what you're doing for the United States Army. Thank you.